Looks like it's 9 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Kelly. I'm this year's CARB chair, and I'd like to welcome everybody, especially our two newest board members, Norm Freeman and John Wines here on my right. I'm really glad to have them on the board this year. Let's begin with introductions. John, we'll start with you. Please introduce yourself, where you're from, and what group you represent.
Turn it on there, John.
There you go. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, hi, my name is John Wines. I am a former department employee. I worked for the department for 27 years, retired this past February. And I'm a member designated by the board of directors of an organization that is qualified pursuant to Section 501c3. And that organization is the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers chapter of Arizona. I represent a specific organization described as an affiliate of a National Sportsman's Conservation or Shooting Organization, and that's been in existence in the last 5 years, and that's Backcountry Hunters and Anglers.
Morning, my name is Richard Williams. I'm from Scottsdale, Arizona. I represent an organization whose membership consists of a significant cross-section of wildlife conservation and sportsman organizations throughout the state, and that organization is the Arizona Sportsmen for Wildlife Conservation.
Thanks, Rich. I'm Charlie Kelly from Phoenix. I was nominated by the Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society, and I represent groups whose mission is to increase, sustain, or otherwise conserve wild turkey, deer, elk, pronghorn, bighorn sheep, ducks, quail, or fish.
Good morning. My name is Pat Madden. I'm from Flagstaff. I represent the public at large and non-gaming organizations.
Good morning. My name's Norm Freeman. I was nominated by the Diablo Trust, a 501c3 statewide organization representing ranching, livestock, agriculture.
Thanks, Norm. And also, could we have our supporting staff introduce themselves and their affiliation with the board? I know Cindy Freehoff has stepped out of the room, but she is our secretary for the board. Linda, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Linda Pollack, Attorney General's Office.
Hello, my name is Patrick Boyle. I'm also from the Attorney General's Office.
Great. Thank you, folks. Agenda item number 2 is call to the public. Looks like we've got 3 different blue slips here, and if you could limit your comments to 3 minutes. And John Colazar, we'll start off with you, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is John Colazar. I am representing Conservation First USA as well as myself personally. I'm here to speak on behalf of Commissioner James Guggenhauer, who is reapplying for a second term as commissioner. I've had the ability, by working with the department and the commission over the past 20 years, to know 19 different commissioners during that time frame. So I've had a broad expansion in terms of visibility of all the different commissioners that have been here. One of the reasons that I'm supporting Commissioner Guggenhauer for a second term is that he's not tied to any particular industry or group. He's an independent in the sense of how he approaches things. I've been extremely impressed with the analytical mind that Mr. Guggenhauer has, how he approaches things on a detailed basis. He's a sponge for information and data, and he's always bound himself to doing the right thing by best available science. Many commissioners in the past have or have not been approachable, and one of the things about Mr. Guggenhauer is that he is extremely approachable. You know, the tiny town of Payson, over the years, I've been up and down, and he's always available. If you can call him or if you send him an email or a text, he'll respond to you, which is really critical, particularly with conservation groups with different agendas and different ideas wanting to have that. He's also been very amenable to listening to all various aspects of counter arguments. He's detailed to the nth degree and making sure that he knows all the information before he makes his decisions. And finally, I consider him to be a bit of a visionary. As the world changes, he is adept at knowing that there are going to be changes within our whole world, and part of that will be with the Commission as well as the Department for the future. I think those are some of the reasons that I suggest and recommend that Commissioner Guggenhauer be sent to the Governor for a second term. And with that, I'll respond to any questions.
Anybody on the board have a question? Pat?
I'm good.
Yep. Thanks, John, for
Thank
taking
you.
the time to come in and
Thanks, John.
comment.
Thank you,
Appreciate
John.
it.
Appreciate it.
Jim Strogan, do you want to come up, please?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jim Strojan. I am past president of Gila Trout Chapter of Trout Unlimited and the conservation chair of Arizona Trout Unlimited Council. I spoke on behalf of Jim Guggenhauer when he first sought appointment on the Arizona Game and Fish Commission for his first term, and am grateful for the opportunity to, on his behalf again, as he seeks reappointment. I believe that Jim Guggenhauer is an ideal candidate in so many respects. He has extensive managerial experience in multi-million-dollar projects. As part of that experience, he has consistently relied on data to work towards solutions that are sound and get at root causes of the problems. Jim is a valued leader from Gila County and Rim Country. He regularly demonstrates a strong conservation ethic that leads the practice that supports sustainability and best practice management for the health of fish and wildlife in the state. Hunters and ranchers value Jim's keen awareness of the needs of hunters and the importance of ranchers to wildlife management goals. Gila County and Rim Country in particular is the destination for much of the state's population when it comes to fishing, hunting, and outdoor recreation. Because of the importance of this region to the pursuit of these activities, the inclusion of a member to the commission from this region is absolutely critical. There is no one more qualified to represent this region than Jim Guggenhauer. Jim is an angler with an exceptional fishing knowledge that he has demonstrated in several ways over the years. He owns and operates a small business that provides outstanding custom-built rod service and quality rod repair that keeps him in regular contact with anglers. He has been instrumental in bringing bass tournaments and Florida strained bass to Roosevelt Lake. Mr. Guggenhauer understands the importance of fishing to our residents and to the state's economy. With his years of experience on the commission, he has incredible knowledge and perspective on the critical issues facing the department. I've had the good fortune to attend several commission meetings during his tenure and have always been impressed with his preparation and the insights that he provides. He seeks opportunities to engage with hunters, fishers, ranchers, and the public to help learn about issues and concerns that are important to them. He has done an outstanding job writing editorials in the newspaper and speaking on radio talk show interviews on topics that are often misunderstood by outdoorsmen and the public, such as wolf management, use of trail cameras by hunters near watering holes, and the feeding of wildlife in the neighborhood. He is an expert on getting at the crux of an issue and is able to clearly share the department's position and how it is based on sound data and is a well-conceived wildlife management action. I appreciate you providing me the time to share with you some of the qualities that I believe make James Guggenhauer an ideal candidate for Arizona Game and Fish Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim, for taking the time to come and speak on behalf of Commissioner Guggenhauer this morning. Do any of the board members have a question for Jim?
I'm fine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our third blue slips from a guy named Al Su.
Good morning, gentlemen and gentle ladies. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. I'm here in support of Jim Guggenhauer. I just want to read you from what I have down. I am proud to have received the Arizona Game and Fish Volunteer of the Year award 3 years ago. And so I know that how important it is to to do the kind of conservation work that Jim has done. Youth small game, deer hunt camps, Trout Unlimited, fishing camp, and Pace and Wildlife Fair, just to name a few. He continues to conserve and protect Arizona's 800-plus species. Dedication and commitment, not only to the species, but also to the Commission, as he has been proven for the last 5 years. Example, he wants to serve another 5 years, and I know Jim well enough to understand it's not just to get his name on a letterhead or a nameplate. Jim brings a perspective of professionalism through his executive business experience. He's a strategic thinker. Bottom line, Arizona 800-plus species will continue to benefit from Jim's next 5 years on the Arizona Game and Fish Commission. Thank you.
Thanks, Al. Appreciate it. Any questions for Al from the board?
Fine.
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you.
Cindy, do we have any more pink slips, or is that it?
Pink or blue?
Blue. Did I say pink? Well, at least you're female, so.
No, that was it. Just the three.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We'll move on to agenda item number 3, and that's a discussion of the rules and procedures that we're going to use this morning. It's kind of boring, but I think it's important to share them with everybody. The agenda lists today the 3 applicants we'll be interviewing, and we're provided the time slots for their interviews. Each applicant will be given 45 minutes with an opening remark by the applicant, followed by questions from the board and an opportunity for the applicant to make a closing remark. Applicants waiting for their interviews are not permitted to listen or observe the interviews, but once interviewed, may stay to observe the remaining interviews or leave if they so choose. The interview process consists of 2 rounds of questions. Each board member asks his or her first question with an option to ask a clarifying follow-up question. After all board members have asked their first question, board members ask their second question, again with the option of asking a clarifying question. The chairman will determine the order of questioning, and this order remains the same for both rounds of questioning. If the 45-minute time slot is due to expire, the chair will stop questioning at an appropriate opportunity and ask for a closing remark so that all applicants have equal time for their interview. The chair may modify the time schedule as needed to provide for breaks. Following the completion of the interviews, the chairperson calls for a written vote. This vote will be conducted in public this morning. As always, each board member is given a ballot with the applicants' names. Board members have 20 points that they can allocate to their preferred applicants. No board member may award more than 10 points to any one applicant. Board members are not required to allocate all 20 points if they so choose. The members shall then provide their written ballots to the secretary for tallying. The secretary will tally the points, announce the total points received by each applicant, and the chair will entertain a motion to approve a list of candidates to forward to the governor. The board forwards a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 5 candidates to the governor's office. Any questions from the board members or the public on the procedures? Hearing none, we'll move on. Let's start with disclosures and recusals. John Wines, could you please start off?
Yeah, I have no disclosures or recusals.
Mr. Chairman, I have no disclosures or recusals.
Personally, I'm familiar with Mr. Guggenauer from 2 previous CARB sessions and from interacting with him during his 5 years as an acting commissioner. From those experiences, I do not feel I have any reason to recuse myself from evaluating him as a potential commissioner candidate. Patrick Headington, I'm also familiar with Mr. Headington from previous CARB sessions, as well as serving with him on a couple of Arizona wildlife conservation organizations. From those experiences, I do not feel I have any reason to recuse myself from evaluating him as a potential applicant. Israel Torres, I have never met this gentleman and have no knowledge about him prior to receiving his application for this CARB session. Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only issue would be with Jim Guggenauer. We served together on the Lake Roosevelt board, and other than that, I wouldn't have a problem making a decision on Jim.
Thank you. Norm?
Mr. Chairman, the only applicant I've interacted with is Patrick Headington from Yuma Valley Rod and Gun Club, but that was years ago, and I have no reason to recuse myself. There's no relationship there beyond discussing wildlife.
Great. Thank you from everybody on the board. Looks like we can go ahead and get started with our interview process. We've got Israel Torres down first. Is he out in the lobby? Thank you. I didn't think we'd hit 9:15 that close. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's good. 12:18.
Get her done.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Torres. I'd like to run through real quick, kind of give you a rundown on how we conduct the interviews, if that would help you out.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining us today for the interview and for an opening on the Arizona Game and Fish Commission. We're excited to learn about your background and why you are interested in applying for this position. Before we begin with the questions, we would appreciate it if you could provide us with an opening remark and a brief background about yourself. This will give us a better understanding of your qualifications and motivations for seeking this role on the commission. Following your opening remark, each of our recommendation board members will have the opportunity to ask you a question of their choosing. They may also ask you a follow-up question if necessary. We believe this will allow us to gain a comprehensive understanding of your skills and experiences. After the first set of questions, we will proceed with the second round, where each board member will have the chance to ask an additional question. Towards the end of the interview, you will also have an opportunity to share a closing remark. Please keep in mind we've allocated 45 minutes for your interview this morning. If time's running short during the second set of questions, we'll stop and allow you sufficient time to do a closing remark. Once your interview is complete, you're welcome to join for the remainder of the meeting, or you're free to leave if you desire. Once again, thank you for being here. We look forward to hearing more about your qualifications and why you're interested in joining the Arizona Game and Fish Commission. So if you'd like to
Thanks,
kick it
sir.
off with an opening remark.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
One, thank you for the consideration this morning. I'm Israel Torres, and appreciate your consideration to be a member of the Game and Fish Commission. I'm an avid outdoorsman. I've interacted with the agency for over 35 years in some capacity. Either, you get a little echo, can you hear that? Sorry about that.
That's okay. Just
Is that
keep it
okay?
close to your mouth. Yeah.
You get it. Have interacted with the agency over the last 35 years, either registering a water vessel or procuring a hunting and fishing license. Professionally, I'm an attorney. I've managed my own practice for almost 20 years. We've been as big as 25. We currently sit around 12 or 13. Proud that we've been named by the Business Journal as one of the best places to work in Arizona for 8 of the last 12 years. Prior to my professional practice, I served in public offices, including the City of Phoenix Zoning Administrator. I was also a member of Governor Janet Napolitano's cabinet as the Director of the Registrar of Contractors. In that capacity, I served as the Governor's Chief Advisor on construction and development related matters. During my time as a registrar, we oversaw 11 field offices, over 60,000 residential and commercial contractors, worked on a statewide level to educate homeowners and industry related to residential and commercial construction. I'm proud that the agency was recognized by the National Association of State Contractor Licensing Agencies as a national model for other state agencies nationwide. In addition to educating contractors, we also focused on people. We worked with industry and implemented first-time programs like Project Kool-Aid, which provided air conditioning systems to families in need, particularly in some of the sweltering months in southern Arizona. We implemented programs like Helping Hands for Seniors, which provided ramps and home modifications to seniors who couldn't afford to make the necessary retrofits to their homes or trailers that would allow them to continue to live independently. The agency licensed contractors, but also did good things for families in need. One of the best parts of sitting on the governor's cabinet for me was that back then, the cabinet meetings, you sat alphabetically per your name. So there was Director Roberts, Director Schrauf, Director Torres. And so I got to, you may remember that obviously Dwayne was a former director, and I got to pepper him with all my questions on my favorite agency since we sat next to each other. So that was fun. He was a good guy. I also served professionally as a Coconino County Forest Lakes Fire District Board member around the Mogollon Rim. In that role, we provide fire and emergency medical services. We work closely with our fire chief and the several levels of governments, from the U.S. Forest Service to the state to county services, especially related to fire safety in our extreme fire danger months of the summer. I presently chair the committee on the board that refined our communication protocols to ensure our communication with the public in the unfortunate case of a fire emergency. This has included, of course, understanding the government bodies that operate in this space and incorporating social media best practices to ensure the protection of lives and the security of property. Personally, a bit about who I am and what defines me. I'm a fourth generation coming from a proud lineage of copper miners, tracing my roots to the Arizona and New Mexico territory in the mid-1800s. My great-grandfathers and uncles worked in mines like the Little Fanny Mine in Mogollon, many other mines in the Arizona Copper Corridor. Copper mines have been a part of my family going back generations. In fact, I regrettably lost my dad in a mine accident when I was 6 years old. He was only 26. So it goes without saying that copper mines in Arizona run deep in my family roots. I'm the proud father of two amazing kids who each have served as a hunting, snowmobiling, fishing, or hiking partner at some point over their lives. My 21-year-old son is a senior at ASU. My 20-year-old daughter is a junior at ASU. So most of my money goes to ASU, as you can imagine.
Mine does too.
I feel the pain. We have hiked, fished, paddled, hunted, bird watched, UTV'd, mountain biked in every corner of our beautiful state. From Lake Powell to Mount Humphreys to the Santa Ritas to even full moon night kayaking. Conserving and protecting Arizona's wildlife and resources is a delicate balance now and for future generations. I'm happy, Mr. Chairman, to answer any questions from the members. I'm hopeful that you view my application in a favorable light.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. I appreciate it. John, if you don't mind, we'll kick off with you for the first question.
I knew you were going to do that.
Yeah. Norm made me promise.
I paid him to do it.
Okay, great. So good to have you here, Mr. Torres. My first question regards department policy on habitat. Over the last decade or so, the Commission has weakened its stance on wildlife and habitat conservation. For instance, the words conserve, enhance, and restore Arizona's diverse wildlife resources and habitats through aggressive protection and management were removed from the department's mission and replaced with the words to conserve Arizona's diverse wildlife resources. Last year in 2022, the Commission changed their policy on habitat loss from requiring the department to seek, quote, compensation at 100% level when feasible for actual potential habitat losses, end quote, to instead directing the department to, quote, seek all opportunities to identify and implement conservation measures, end quote. My question to you is, should the Commission again direct the department to aggressively conserve, enhance, and restore the state's wildlife and habitats, or is the current policy language okay with you?
Not being overly familiar with the priorities and policies at the board level, first thing I'd want to do is listen and get advice from the director as well as my fellow board members to understand that more carefully. It sounds like it turns on the definition of whether we're aggressively going to do that. And so I do think it's a delicate balance, and I think it's important that, you know, the stakeholders come together and put together a policy that's, you know, the best for the state. I wish I could answer it more carefully about whether, you know, devil's in the detail when it comes to what aggressively means. And so I hope that's sufficient.
John, do you have a follow-up question for Mr. Torres?
No follow-up.
Thank you. Rich?
First of all, thank you for your interest in becoming a Game and Fish Commissioner, coming down and speaking with us today.
Sure.
If you would, please describe the North American model of wildlife conservation and how it relates to the Arizona Game and Fish Commission and the Arizona Game and Fish Department.
I'm not overly familiar with the reference that you mentioned, so I'm not sure. I can't speak to that at this point.
Okay, thank you.
No follow-up, Rich? Okay. The question I've got for you, Mr. Torres, the role of all successful commissioners is to help develop effective strategies to manage Arizona's wildlife in the best ways possible. In order to do this effectively, a first-hand knowledge of our state's diverse wildlife is invaluable. Could you please elaborate on your life's experiences relating to our state's wildlife, as well as your interests in hunting, fishing, bird watching, or other non-consumptive outdoor activities?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, it's a myriad, as I mentioned. I mean, from snowmobiling to hunting, fishing. You know, I think at some point we've hunted deer, turkey, javelina, obviously dove, quail, elk. You know, we do regular bird hunts and regular, we have an annual deer hunting trip that we've done for the last 20 years. And so from being on Arizona's lakes to, you know, paddling you know, many of our streams, it's like, it's just a part of who I am. It's a part of being, it's a part of my being and my family. It's very important. We've done a little bit of everything on a regular basis. It's just something that we really look forward to. Obviously in Coconino County, the Forest Lakes area with the Fire District Board, actively involved there with the number of ways that our fire district interacts with the users of, you know, the forest and the lakes in the area. And so, you know, it's been a big part of who I am. It's a big part of being an outdoorsman. I was talking to a gentleman outside. My daughter reminded me when I told her I was coming for my interview, she said, you know, your yearbook, your high school yearbook, which was a long time ago, says, it's got that section of what do you want to do in your life. And mine said, be a lawyer or game warden. And I look back on that. I look back on that, and I'm like, wow, it's been a long time that being in the outdoors is a big part of who we are.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Pat?
Yes, thank you. 1 second. Now I can see the paper. A major key to having an effective 5-member commission is having every member attend and participate in every meeting. Given your current occupation and obligations, are you able to fill this tremendous commitment of time to serve the commission?
Thank you, sir. I think it's a critical question for anybody serving on Arizona's boards or commissions. The short answer is yes. This would be, you know, a phenomenal opportunity. I would welcome it very much. You know, from the outside looking in, it's been a part, like I said, of who I am and what we do for a number of years. As a board member, I would need to become more versed in some of the specific policy matters, like Mr. Williams mentioned in his question. Definitely not an expert in those matters, but I'm happy to dig in, roll up my sleeves, and learn more about the not only the policies but the positions that, you know, impact the Game and Fish Commission, from all the stakeholders involved. So I think it's super important to be a part of that and hear those out. So yes, I'd be eager to serve. Yes, sir.
No follow-up.
Norm?
Mr. Torres, thank you for coming today and for all of the service you've provided to the state over the years.
Thank you.
I was wondering, can you describe the landowner compact program that the department has?
No, sir. I cannot.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with it.
If I might ask a follow-up. Wildlife's held in a public trust, state lands, state trust lands. There's a balance. What are the benefits that the department and the public gain by allowing sportsmen access to private lands? What's the value to that?
The benefits that the state gets by allowing sportsmen on private land?
Both sides, the landowners and the state. What are the benefits? Where's the fulcrum? Where's the balance point on land access?
Yeah, I mean, just some personal observations, but professionally, policy-wise, I'd be interested in hearing from ranchers and how the impacts to their land. I grew up on a small ranch, Buckmore Hay than I can remember, but I know that there's specific impacts, and those are delicate balances. And so, as an outsider, it's not something I look at as a policy matter very carefully over the years. It's not what my practice involves, but I would first think it's important that we, I understand more fully how it impacts private landowners. I know that from like the Forest Lakes Fire District Board, many times we have issues occurring on public or private lands that are maybe invisible to the everyday individual kind of person that's in the area. And so the folks, like the landowners that are there, that it may provide an undue burden on the things they're dealing with. And so without more specifics, I think it's important to understand what the impact is to others in the area. And obviously the benefits would be, obviously, it's state land. A quick knee-jerk response to that would be for the folks that are using it. It's more land for them to use and recreate in, and if it's done in a meaningful, responsible way, I think that that's part of what Arizona is we're out west and we've got a lot of land to work with. But I would want to balance how that affects particularly ranchers, because that's they own a lot of big acres of land like that. I hope that was
Thank you.
enough.
Appreciate that.
Any follow-up question, Norm?
Have you done any work with any of the, either directly with some of the committees the department has or with various wildlife stakeholder groups? Have you done work on either side, whether it be habitat or whether it be species management or whether it be bird watching and watchable wildlife? Have you been members or actively involved in any of those activities?
No, sir, I haven't. I've got between my law practice and my kids that are now getting to that place where I can trust them to go off on their own a little bit more. Between raising a family, running a practice, and serving on the fire district board, there's not a lot of extra time for that. But I do think that organized groups are critical for policymaking, and so I'd be very interested to learn more about those.
Well, at least you're in God's country up there. My family had Forest Lake stuff since the 60s, so it's pretty.
It's beautiful.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Norm. John, do you want to go ahead with your second round of questions?
Sure, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Torres, my second question regards commercialization of wildlife. Wildlife is a limited resource that has the potential to create profit when used for a commercial enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
In general, market hunting and fishing are practices, fishing are practices of the past. But there is still a lot of money spent on sport hunting and angling. Do you believe the profit motive can negatively impact the North American model of wildlife management? And if so, what practices do you see as a threat to that model, which we should never accept here in Arizona?
I'm not overly familiar with the specific kinds of practices, but I do believe that any part of policy for any state agency that's driven by profit can always be, that can be a negative a consequence with certain unintended results. So I'm thinking that maybe some of the guides that I'm not sure if that's where this policy question kind of turns on, but I do think that's anything that's profit driven when it comes to wildlife and conservation. I do think that can be something to consider carefully as to like what's the driving force there. So I'm not sure profit should play a role in that.
Mr. Chairman, no follow-up.
No follow-up? Okay, thank you. Rich?
Mr. Torres, up in your neck of the woods, I'm sure you're familiar with the feral horses that are running around there.
Yes, sir.
Give us your thoughts on the difficulty in managing them and maybe how you think they ought to be managed.
Yeah, it's a delicate question, and for the wildlife and for the horses, it's definitely rough. I focus more on the impact that they've got, particularly on we have a lot of traffic accidents on the 260. A lot of times that's a part of that. I would want to. I'm not trying to punt on the question, Mr. Williams, but I would want to learn with folks who know way more about that. Just in all sincerity, I think it's important that we have some kind of policy to work with them. Folks a lot smarter than me right now, and I'm happy anytime to admit that, particularly in specialized areas of what the commission works on. I recognize that there's professionals who do this on a daily basis, and as a policymaker, I think it's important to take that information and make reasonable and calculated strategic decisions on those. So I don't know the things that are in play to how to manage them now. I'm not familiar with those, other than very cursory on the outside. But I would want to learn more from the professionals who oversee that to get their thoughts on that before I issued a policy on it.
Thank you. I have no further.
No follow-up? Okay. Thanks, Rich. Mr. Torres, my second question for you. Arizona is blessed to have a large number of non-governmental organizations, we call them NGOs, dedicated to the conservation of big game animals as well as fish and bird species. The volunteer work performed by these NGOs not only supplements the efforts of the Arizona Game and Fish Department personnel, but it also brings in serious matching funds from programs like Pittman Robertson. What are your feelings on their contributions, and what volunteer work have you been involved with related to wildlife NGOs?
Haven't had any volunteer work related to that. I do think that obviously they have a role in game and fish. We want to learn more about what that role is over the years and how it benefits game and fish. I think these NGOs, we can't do this alone, whether it be at the registrar's office or whether it be at the Game and Fish. Like, we need private partners who are in this space and are helpful to the priorities of the commission. And so, in addition to everyday users, I do think that these outside groups can be very helpful to that.
Thank you. No follow-up from me on that one. Pat, want to go ahead?
You bet. Please tell us about how you see the role of commissioners in interacting with department employees and pushing objectives.
Yeah, first thing I want to do, Mr. Mann, is learn more specifically about the culture at the Game and Fish Commission with the staff. Any board or commission that I've sat on in the past, there is, I think, very clear lines of delineation to ensure that it operates in a professional and harmonious fashion. And that generally includes board members don't work directly with, aren't going directly to staff on things, and you're generally working through a director or a chairman or a chairperson that's going to work closely to the staff. And so I don't know how formal the Game and Fish Commission is, but I do think those formalities are important to ensure that the director is held accountable for his work, and that the commissioners, frankly, are handling concerns from the public in a professional manner that they can actually implement a solution or implement a discussion related to those items. So I'd want to learn, there's different cultures in different organizations. I obviously want to learn more about the game and fish culture with respect to the board. But I do think that lines of delineation, responsibilities in any professional organizations are clearly paramount to ensure it operates the way it should. For the public, of course.
Thank you.
Yes,
No
sir.
follow-up.
Okay. Thank you. Norm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Torres, can you name some benefits of cattle grazing on public lands? Do you see it as if there's benefits, what are the benefits? If there's detriments, what are the detriments?
Very cursory, Mr. Freeman. From the perspective of obviously the benefits are some of the mitigation efforts that with regard to brushery and things that need to be naturally cleared. Obviously, the detriments are overgrazing. I hate to be oversimplistic about it, but that's about as deep at this level from having stood on the outside that jump out to me.
And how do you determine if a director is effective?
When I sat in the chair, and at the time, Governor Napolitano determined that for me. Of course, we're one of the only state agencies at the registrar's office that doesn't actually have a board, so that was a little bit unique from that perspective. And I remember when I interviewed with Governor Napolitano, or sat down for the appointment, something stands out to me. She said, "I don't care what time you come to work or what time you go home, as long as it's dark." And so that stuck with me, of course. I thought, oh, it's my agency. I do what I want. Oh, okay. So no, I do think that I do think that the employee morale. I mentioned our office has been one of the best places to work in the state. I'm really proud of that. In that managing people is a difficult job, and creating buy-in and getting people to move in the same direction of what the mission is for the organization, it's not easy. And a director's got multiple stakeholders, from the legislature to the board to the public to the NGOs to the staff. And I think many times they're kind of in that order, and I'm not sure they should be, because I think they're all equally important. And so the attitudes and feelings of our game wardens, of our staff at any level in the organization, ultimately impact how the operation operates and works. And so I do think that a director, to be effective, has to be looking at all those stakeholders, walk and chew gum, look at all those stakeholders, be willing to say no when the answer is no, and be open to new ideas that need to be explored and discussed, whether they come from the public or from the staff or from the board. So I do think that open communication. It sounds a little bit elementary, from like, yeah, that's what a good director needs, but it's hard to do. It's hard to do. Okay.
It can be challenging to figure out the metrics on how to evaluate one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Norm.
Thank you, Mr. Torres.
Are there any more questions for Mr. Torres from any of the board members? Looks like we got through them pretty quickly. We've got plenty of time for your closing remark, Mr. Torres, if you'd like to go ahead and kick that off.
Sure. I'd like to just follow up on Mr. Freeman's question. One of the things that's important as well is to set clear expectations, as whatever the priorities of the commission are. It's important to set clear expectations for the director to implement that, because that's the role of how this works. And so clear expectations create more easily accountable measures. You can be held accountable, and it's very clear what's expected of you. And so I just wanted to follow up on that, because I do think that the board has a role in creating a clear set of expectations for the director as to what the board's agenda is for that. With that, thank you all for your time. I wish I could have been more specific on many of the kind of internal questions that move the agency. I've been professionally and personally, from the outside a part of the agency for a number of years. Professionally, I am able to dig into some of these policies that drive the internal operations of an agency. I understand how complicated and how nuanced those can be. As the registrar of contractors, we also had nuances related to the types of commercial construction, the types of residential construction, the role that the public should have in some of these initiatives that are very specific to the industry. Not having been a member to hear some of these insider portions, I wish I could have shed more light on some of those for sure. But you should be comfortable that I stand ready, willing, and able to embrace unfamiliar matters and information, to dig into that and be a contributing member of the board that really is overseeing so much of what's important to me and my family and so many others in the room, as well as residents of the state. So I appreciate your time this morning. I would very much be interested in serving on the Game and Fish Commission. Hope you see my application favorably. It's been a big part of outdoors, outdoorsman. Part of it has been a big part of who we are, my family, for generations, and I'd consider it an honor to be able to serve.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time this morning.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody on the board want to take a break now, or do you want to go?
I do.
Okay. We've got the next interview scheduled for 10 o'clock. So why don't we take a recess and we'll meet back at 10 o'clock when Patrick Headington will be coming up for an interview.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yes, sir.
again. Thank you, Mr. Torres.
Pat, welcome. Why don't you come up to the podium? We'll be ready for you momentarily. I'd like to call the meeting back to order at 10 o'clock. Our next applicant is Pat Headington from Yuma. Good morning, Pat. For your benefit, I just quickly want to go through our interview process so you'll know what to expect. I know you've been here before, so probably no big surprises. Thank you for joining us today for your interview for an opening on the Arizona Game and Fish Commission. We're excited to learn about your background and why you're interested in applying for this position. Before we begin with the questions, we would appreciate it if you could provide us with an opening remark and a brief background about yourself. This will give us a better understanding of your qualifications and motivations for seeking the role on the commission. Following your opening remark, each of our recommendation board members will have the opportunity to ask you a question of their choosing. They may also ask you a follow-up question if necessary. We believe this will allow us to gain a comprehensive understanding of your skills and experiences. After the first set of questions, we will proceed with the second round where each board member will have a chance to ask an additional question. Towards the end of the interview, you will have an opportunity to provide a closing remark. Please keep in mind we've allocated 45 minutes for this interview. If we're running short on time with the second set of questions, we'll end them and give you time for a closing remark, which is important. Once your interview is complete, you're welcome to join the remainder of the meeting, or you're free to leave if you desire. Once again, thanks for being here. We look forward to hearing more about your qualifications and why you're interested in joining the Arizona Game and Fish Commission. So with that, if you'd like to kick it off with an opening remark.
Thank you, Chairman Kelly, members of the board. Pat Headington, Yuma, Arizona. I am a lifelong Yuman, lifelong Arizonan, something of an anomaly in this day and age, in that I'm the second of three generations in my family to graduate from Yuma High School. So needless to say, we kind of own the place down there to a certain extent. I grew up hunting and fishing in the southwest corner of Arizona. Deer, hunting and bass fishing with my dad and brother. That's just how we grew up. And after moving on a little bit, I've had the opportunity to hunt literally and fish many, many corners of Arizona. I've enjoyed it so very much. Once I became a member of the Yuma Valley Rod and Gun Club, I slowly began working my way into the activities that the club is involved with. including those with the Arizona Game and Fish Department, waterhole projects, habitat projects, all of those kinds of things, and just becoming more and more involved, even today, with the department and working with the department to move things forward, conversations and such. It's why do I want to do this? I want to do this for the benefit of Arizona's wildlife, not just for today, but the next generation. So that my kids, my grandkids, our grandkids can enjoy what we have on the landscape today. That's what this is really all about. My qualifications, I'm sure you've all read my resume, 20 plus years in construction, including that of starting as a framer, working my way up to a licensed residential general contractor, project manager, then moving over to the county, where I somewhat of a governmental role, retiring a week ago tomorrow.
Wow.
After 24 years as the chief building and fire code official for Yuma County. Pick up a lot of good things along the way in how government works. Spend a lot of time watching how the commission works, the department works, and honestly think I can be a benefit for the average sportsman on the landscape. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close my opening remarks and hand it back to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Headington. Great opening remark. We appreciate it. John, do you want to kick it off with your question again?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Headington, my first question for you regards department habitat policy. Over the last decade or so, the Commission has weakened its stance on wildlife and habitat conservation. For instance, the words, quote, conserve, enhance, and restore Arizona's diverse wildlife resources and habitats through aggressive protection and management, end quote, were removed from the department's mission and replaced with the words, quote, to conserve Arizona's diverse wildlife resources, end quote. In 2022, last year, the Commission changed their policy on habitat loss from requiring the department to seek, quote, compensation at a 100% level when feasible for actual or potential habitat losses, end quote, to instead directing the department to seek all opportunities to identify and implement conservation measures. My question to you is, should the Commission again direct the department to aggressively conserve, enhance, and restore the state's wildlife and habitats, or is the current policy language okay with you?
I think my response to that question, sir, is in light of the assault, if you will, from outside entities on our habitat and resources, I would personally like to see the Commission take a more aggressive approach to maintaining habitat or incorporating or including some sort of mitigation efforts into particularly solar projects as these projects are moving forward. Yuma Valley Rod and Gun Club just finished yesterday, just blocked a special use permit by the Yuma County Board of Supervisors to approve an almost 4,200 acre solar project in Yuma County on state trust land. We cannot allow the continued loss of habitat in Arizona on the landscape. That was our position. That is our position. So yes, I would like to see the Commission and the department take a more aggressive approach to establishing mitigation efforts and protecting the habitat that we have. It cannot be replaced, and we cannot refurbish it once it's lost. It will take hundreds of years if it can be refurbished at all. So I hope that answers your question, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
No follow-up?
Mr. Chairman, no follow-up.
Thank you. Rich?
Pat, thanks for your interest still and coming back to talk with us again. Much appreciated. You stole my first question. I appreciate your thoughts on solar farms and wind farms. But if you would, tell us then what you think are a couple more important issues that are going to face the Commission in the next 5 years.
Some of the things that I believe the Commission faces within the next 5 years, of course, revenue streams are always going to be at the top of the list, and maintaining those revenue streams, particularly with Arizona's political climate in a constant state of change. The eastward migration, if you will, of folks off of the West Coast, that will be a constant challenge. The balancing act of managing wildlife in an ever-growing and expanding urban or rural environment is going to be a challenge for the Commission and the Department also. And I'll go back and just recall an event. It's been a few years ago. The Commission had the challenge on contest hunting. That came primarily out of central Arizona, and they had to make some decisions on that. And they did. They took an action that they felt was appropriate to identify what that is. 6 months later, you have folks in the Scottsdale area, the northern Scottsdale area, complaining about wildlife, mainly coyotes, predators, coming into those neighborhoods and picking up their dogs and cats and pets for dinner. So this is just one, those are just a couple of the balancing acts that I see facing the Department and the Commission is how do we balance those in an ever-expanding and political climate and just get people to understand that they're moving into an area where wildlife is, and you have a responsibility to take care of your own animals. Some of the other things that we're going to be facing are the ever-increasing environmental responsibilities that are handed down to us from the federal government. We saw some of that come to fruition with some proposed revisions to the rulemaking on live bait. This past year, the Yuma Valley Rod and Gun Club was very active in working to mitigate some of those. So to me, those would kind of be the top three, if you will, that I would see the Commission and Department facing, sir.
Thank you. I have no follow-up.
Thanks, Rich. Pat, my first question for you. The role of all successful commissioners is to help develop effective strategies to manage Arizona's wildlife in the best ways possible. In order to do this effectively, a first-hand knowledge of our state's diverse wildlife is invaluable. Could you please elaborate on your life's experiences relating to our state's wildlife, as well as your interests in hunting, fishing, bird watching, or other non-consumptive outdoor activities?
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. For me, I have been so fortunate to be able to access Arizona's public lands for hunting and angling and the waters and all. The deer hunting and such that I've been able to perform down in the southwest corner. Dad wanted to move to some of his old haunts back around Wickiup when he and his younger brothers were up there hunting, to Coues deer hunts over in southeastern Arizona, elk hunts in central and northeastern Arizona, predator hunts. Most of my fishing has been related to or focused down in the southwest corner along the Colorado River corridor. We have done some trout fishing up around Springerville and some bass fishing up around Springerville. A lot of people don't know there's bass up there. Then had some fairly good success with it. Some years ago, some of you may remember Commissioner Joe Melton, who unfortunately we lost here in July. But some years ago, I rode a trap line with Joe and enjoyed watching his works and harvesting of predators for fur and stuff. So that's kind of my hunting experience and fishing experience. Some of the non-consumptive uses, it's some of my greatest times and enjoyment is simply going out in the desert, setting up a camp, and you get ready to lay down and go to sleep at night. You look up and you see nothing but a big sky full of stars. And all of a sudden, everything that's going on down here gets real, real small. And that, to me, is one of the most enjoyable times that I've had. After hunting 41 in one particular area in the East Arm most all my life, a few years ago, we found a fishhook cactus growing out of the top of a boulder, probably 12 feet above the ground. And this little fishhook cactus was just tremendous in size, unbelievably large. 3 years later, along comes the drought, and we go back into that same area and look for that little fishhook cactus, and the little rodents and everything have devoured that poor little thing as a result of that. So it's one of the things that we've lost in our area, because it was one of those little gems that we knew about, that we would always just kind of go take a look at it and just see if it was still there. But honestly, just to get out in the field, spend that time in the field as that non-consumptive user, just being out there and enjoying it, enjoying the colors, the wildlife, and the time with my family. That's what it means to me. So.
Great, thank you. Pat, your turn.
Thank you. Well, this might get in with your announcement about your retirement, but I'm still going to ask it. A major key to having an effective 5-member commission is having every member attend and participate in every meeting. Given your current occupation, which is retire, I'm sure, and other obligations, you're able to fulfill this tremendous commitment of time to serve the commission.
Actually, Mr. Madden, thank you for that question. While I have retired from Yuma County, I am unfortunately too young to quit. Dang it. And insurance, medical insurance, as we all know, is just far too pricey for. So I have accepted an offer to start work for a private firm November 27th of this year. I have talked with my employer and do have the time and stuff necessary to delegate to this responsibility if I am so fortunate to be selected.
Thank you. One follow-up, too.
Sure.
Thinking of wording here. The commission travels a lot throughout the state. Usually, I don't know if it's currently or not, but every other meeting we had in a community, all over the state. Will that affect your new position?
No, sir. I don't believe so, because my new position may likely take me to other corners of the state than Yuma. There's already some conversation about a post up here in the Metro Phoenix area. So it's going to move me around quite a little bit as waters training and such goes. My biggest concern as far as the travel goes is finding a vehicle that I can sit in comfortably. And if so, in one of my first conversations with Commissioner Brake, and coming into an interview such as this, if you are successful, you need to go buy yourself a Prius. And I can appreciate his recommendation. However, after all my years in construction, you try and fold me in half and put me in one of those little cars, you just literally have to unwrinkle me to get out. So that's going to be my biggest challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
No further.
Norm.
That's what pickup trucks are for. Pat, thank you for applying again and being here, and more importantly, for your lifelong service to wildlife in Arizona. Can you describe the Landowner Compact Program?
My understanding of the Landowner Compact Program is agreements established by the department with ranching cattle owners throughout the state. I believe there's a dozen of them included in the compact that established a set of rules that we all need to follow as far as courtesy and travel and littering and respect for the wildlife and the infrastructure that these ranchers have created and maintained on this landscape. So there are some penalties set up for those who violate that, including the loss of access and a temporary loss of access and a possible permanent loss of access. All of this is just to protect those relationships with these landowners, the investments they have in their infrastructure, their ranching infrastructure. I support those. They're 100% necessary in order for all of the public to maintain access to these lands. It's my understanding, sir.
Do you think that program should be expanded, or it sounds like you think it's worthwhile, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you have any ideas on how it could be expanded or pushed forward?
Off the top of my head, no. I would have to give that some thought as to how we could move something like that forward. I'm not sure if there are other ranches that would be open to having those conversations, or possibly even some larger landowners, private landowners, that would be interested in having those conversations. But certainly the responsibilities of those traveling into newer areas and to maintain that infrastructure remains, whether they're a part of this compact or not.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
John, you want to proceed with a second question, please?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Pat, my second question for you regards commercialization of wildlife. Wildlife is a limited resource that has the potential to create profit when used for commercial enterprise. In general, market hunting and fishing practices of the past are practices of the past, but there is still a lot of money spent on sport hunting and angling. Do you believe the profit motive can negatively impact the North American model of wildlife management? And if so, what practices do you see as a threat to that model, which we should never accept here in Arizona?
So there's, I think my response to that would be, there's a lot of conversation currently ongoing within the commission about the commercialization of wildlife. And truly, to a certain extent, it's a double-edged sword in that it does create a significant amount of revenue for the department, probably somewhere between, on average, maybe $2.5 million for these auction tags and that. Is that in line with the North American model and opportunity for all? That's debatable, and I think that really is the debate. Does everybody have an opportunity to bid? Yes. Does everybody have the pocketbook to bid? No. And that's where, in my mind, the opportunity for all really kind of comes into play. The challenge is going to be finding a mechanism to meet, in my mind, the intent of the commercialization, the non-commercialization of wildlife that's in the North American model, while salvaging the revenue stream that this current use brings to the table. One thought that could maybe do that is have an open-ended lottery similar to the draw that we have today, but allow unlimited entry for each of those tags. Now, it truly is a lottery process, opportunity for all. Will it generate the same amount of revenue? That would be tough to determine, and I would leave that to department staff to try and sort out and figure out for us. So in a nutshell, I think there are some changes that we probably need to make to bring the current practice more into line with the North American model. But there's also a concern along with money, is there's a lot of groups that rely on these funds and this current opportunity for bidding to generate additional funds for their organization and their habitat projects that they kick forward. So we have to keep that in mind moving forward at the same time. Everybody has to be able to come to the table, and this has to be a win for wildlife, for conservation, for the department. That's the challenge that I think we would face in that particular, addressing that item.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your thoughtful answer.
Thank you.
Good, John?
Yeah,
Okay.
no follow-ups.
Thank you. Rich?
Pat, recently the state of Colorado has begun a program to introduce northern gray wolves into their state. What concerns might this pose for the Mexican gray wolf program in Arizona, for the Arizona Game and Fish Department and its partners in that program?
Mr. Williams, I think the biggest, the issue that I have heard and would resonate would be maintaining the biological separation of the two. The Mexican gray wolf being a separate subspecies of the wolf, and the ability for those two to come together, and now all of a sudden we're mingling those two biological entities together, and we've got a hybrid animal on the landscape. I do believe it has been documented that we have Mexican gray wolves above Interstate 40. They're not great numbers. There's a challenge, keeping them. The goal is to keep them below I-40, and I don't know that that's a goal that's truly attainable, because we're just not going to have the ability to control where these animals move on a daily basis. They're in search of food, habitat, cover, as any other predator would be. That would be I think that would be the biggest concern I think the department would have, is just being able to maintain that biological separation. That's the one I'm most familiar with, sir.
Thank you, Pat. Good. All set? Pat, my second question for you. Arizona's blessed to have a large number of non-governmental organizations, NGOs as we call them, dedicated to the conservation of big game animals as well as fish and bird species. The volunteer work performed by these NGOs not only supplements the effort of the Arizona Game and Fish personnel, but it also brings in serious matching funds for programs like Pittman Robertson. What are your feelings on their contributions, and what volunteer work have you been involved with related to wildlife NGOs?
Well, Mr. Kelly, this comes back to also one of the questions that Mr. Wins asked, and that involvement of the NGOs and those wildlife organizations. For myself and the Yuma Valley Rod and Gun Club, just last year we built 3 new waters and rehabilitated a 4th up near Quartzsite. We've done a lot of water hauling this year, and we do every year depending on the amount of rain we get. A lot of conversations on water hole construction currently going on, and the updates to that program and those plans. So we have had some meetings with those folks trying to keep doing what we're doing down in our corner of the world, seeing as how we get a grand total of 3.5 inches of rain every year. So it's tough to capture water that you simply don't get. I've not been involved with any of the relocation projects. Those have all been during the week for the most part, so I haven't had an opportunity. But the work of the NGOs and the amount of match funds that they bring to the landscape for the department is critical for the department to maintain its budget as well as its day-to-day operations. If I recall from some of the presentations, the non-governmental organizations bring the equivalent of an additional 60 personnel to the landscape for the department. And that is a tremendous number of staff that you don't have to pay, that show up willingly every day to work and take on the task at hand. And to lose those dollars is I don't know of any other way to say it, just can be tremendously detrimental to the department, as well as those partnerships. those partnerships are probably even more, maybe just as valuable as those dollars. Hope that answers your question, sir.
It sure does, Pat. Thank you. Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you. Pat, tell us about how you see the role of commissioners in interacting with department employees and pushing objectives.
Ooh. Well, the last time I checked, the commission has one employee, and that is the director. So any conversations as far as game and fish staff and directives or any of that has to go through the director. I mean, we can have conversations and cordial and casual conversations with staff, but as far as directives and anything, policy, all of that has to go through the director. It must. If the commission's not happy with the director, then that's a whole different conversation.
Thank you, Pat.
Yep.
No further.
Okay. Thank you. Norm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you name some of the benefits of allowing grazing on public lands?
Some of the benefits that I am aware of grazing on public lands is a shared resource for wildlife as well as livestock, a reduction of fuel loads, helping to mitigate wildfire, and providing additional job opportunities for the ranchers and those folks who operate those. Those are the three that come to mind right off the bat, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you. And how do you have any ideas on how you would determine, to Pat's question, how would you determine if a director is being effective as a commissioner, hopefully, and not the commissioner?
Well, that's a tough one. That is a tough one. I think for me it would just be having some conversations with the director and sharing philosophy with how, in my role with Yuma County, I built a team. And I was so fortunate to have the team that I developed and worked with, and that came to work for us. That we communicated well together, we worked well together, and relied upon each other. That's how I would see the role of the director and the commission. So we need to develop that relationship, and I can't speak for the commissioners currently and the relationship they have, but that's what I would like to see moving forward as far as a relationship with the director and this individual, should I be so fortunate to be a commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Norm. Do any of the other board members have any more questions for Pat? Looks like we're done with our second round. Pat, you want to give us a closing remark, and you've got plenty of time, looks like.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I just want to thank you for this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to come before you and talk with you folks. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed working with the department, and will continue working with the department on the challenges that lie in front of us, water holes and so many other things. Regardless of the outcome of this application. So I want to thank you for your time and your service to Arizona and Arizona's wildlife.
Great. Thank you, Pat. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Does anybody know if we've got Jim Guggenauer available? Looks like we can move on to our final interview. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Guggenauer. I seem to recall meeting you before.
So microphones, well, good morning, Chairman Kelly, and good morning to the CARB. Thank you for considering my application.
What I'd like to do, Jim, and I'll, out of fairness to all applicants, I'll go ahead and go through our interview rules real quick with your procedures, if you don't mind. Thank you for joining us today for your interview. We're excited to learn more about your background and why you're interested in applying for another term on the commission. Before we begin with the questions, we would appreciate if you could provide us with an opening remark and a brief background about yourself. This will give us a better understanding of your qualifications and motivations for seeking another term on the commission. Following your opening remark, each of our recommendation board members will have the opportunity to ask you a question of their choosing. They may also ask you a follow-up question if necessary. We believe this will allow us to gain a comprehensive understanding of your skills and experiences. After the first set of questions, we will proceed with the second round, where each board member will have the chance to ask additional questions. Towards the end of the interview, you also have the opportunity to share a closing remark with us. Please keep in mind we've allocated 45 minutes for the interview. If we're running out of time, we'll stop the second set of questions and provide you enough time for a closing remark. Once the interview is complete, you're welcome to join the remainder of the meeting. Once again, thank you for being here. We're looking forward to learning more about your qualifications and why you're interested in a second term on the Arizona Game and Fish Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me start by saying, for the record, my name is James Guggenauer. I live in the town of Payson, which is in Gila County. I've been a resident of the state of Arizona for 44 years, and I've been married to my wife, Dolores, for 23 years. And before I get started, I'd like to just say a thank you to the CARB for your volunteer work. As a commissioner, I know that your pay grade is about the same as what it is on the commission. So on behalf of all of us here on this side of the dais, we appreciate your volunteerism and thank you for the great work of the CARB.
Thank you.
To me, being a commissioner for the Arizona Game and Fish Department is an absolute honor. But with that honor comes a lot of commitments to it. And the number one commitment is to be prepared for the meetings. It requires a lot of research to get done. It requires a lot of listening to constituents. And it requires seeking out questions and answers to the topics that the commission is working on. And I say seeking out because everyone doesn't always come forward. Sometimes commissioners have to take the initiative to go talk to different groups to get their inputs. And I'll even say that there are some groups and individuals that are antithetical to the mission of the commission and to the North American model. And all of those inputs are important, and it's the commissioner's responsibility to get those inputs before he makes his or her decision. After all of that research and after all of those discussions, then the commission is required to take that and make the best decision that supports the public doctrine. The public trust doctrine is the thing that drives everything about wildlife and conservation. And so that's a great honor along with a great responsibility as being on the commissioner. When I stood before the CARB 5 years ago, I committed to do whatever it took to be prepared for all commission meetings and all issues that come before the commission. And I strive to accomplish that during my time on the commission. And I can tell you, after 5 years of experience, to say that one supports the North American model or they understand the commission of the department or the mission of the commission, it's a lot easier to say that words than it is to actually govern and to set policy within those principles. A lot of work goes into the decisions that the commission makes routinely. I was fortunate enough to get copied on several of the letters that came to the governor's office and to the CARB for my recommendation onto the commission. And I was, number one, very humbled by the words that were written. But number two, I was extremely grateful that a lot of the constituents out there recognized the hard work that the commission does and my commitment to doing that. I think the future for the Game and Fish Department is extremely bright going forward. My passion to be a commissioner is greater today than it was the first time that I applied to be a commissioner. And I am dedicated to continue the work that I have done over the last 5 years. I have the time available to do the work of a commissioner and to continue the success of the commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions the CARB might have for me.
Thanks, Jim, for the opening remark. We appreciate it. John, you want to go ahead and kick it off with your first question?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Guggenhauer, my first question for you is relative to the department's habitat policy.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last decade or so, the Commission has weakened its stance on wildlife and habitat conservation. For instance, the words, quote, conserve, enhance, and restore Arizona's diverse wildlife resources and habitats through aggressive protection and management, end quote, were removed from the department's mission and replaced with the words, quote, to conserve Arizona's diverse wildlife resources, end quote. Last year, in 2022, the Commission changed their policy on habitat loss from requiring the department to seek, quote, compensation at a 100% level when feasible for actual or potential habitat losses, end quote, to instead directing the department to, quote, seek all opportunities to identify and implement conservation measures, end quote. My question to you is, should the Commission again direct the department to aggressively conserve, enhance, and restore the state's wildlife and habitats, or is the current policy language okay with you?
So a couple of comments with that, and if I might, one correction. In the Commission policy, the reimbursement for 100% of the value was recently removed from the Commission policy in that area. Habitat is important to everyone. Since when I first was appointed to the Commission, the first committee that I sat on was the Habitat and Landowner Relations Committee. Since joining that 5 years ago, every year the amount of dollars that were available for habitat has increased. And I'm happy to report that in the current fiscal year, $3.1 million is going to be allocated to habitat this year. Now that includes the department portion, plus the WCOs and any grants that are available to the department. But it's a remarkable state to put that out there. As far as the wording that gets changed, I agree. Every year the Commission goes through the wording on some of these. Times change, society changes. I don't think that the mission or the concept of our landowner relationships program or our habitat program has changed at all in my 5 years. In fact, I think it has been streamlined. It's been a closer relation with the WCOs to get these projects done, and I think it's on a good path going forward.
No follow-up questions.
Okay. Thanks, John. Rich?
Mr. Commissioner, wow, another 5 years, huh?
Yes, sir.
I commend you for your past service and your willingness to serve another 5 years. And I also commend your sweetheart. She must be a real saint.
That's why I mentioned her name. She's part of this, too.
So, Commissioner, what are your thoughts on renewable energy installations and the effects it might have on wildlife, recreation access, and hunting access?
Thank you for that question. And I think it kind of relates back to a little bit what Mr. Wines was saying there. The energy, and I'll lump all energies in here. We're not just talking about solar or wind energy. We're talking about fossil fuel energy as well. And the fact is that the state of Arizona has a population of 7.5 million people. This state is growing at about 100,000 people every year. So every decade, we're adding 1 million people to our population. And with COVID, people are now saying that every 9.5 years, we're gonna add 1 million people. Those are facts that are not, that's not disputable. That trend has been in place for over a decade. So renewable energy, sources of power, sources of water, housing, all of those things are going to need to be built to accomplish that. So for some time, a decade ago, the department wrote a manual that said when we bring new energy into the state, and it's going to impact habitat. It has to. It just takes its presence there. But the department wrote a set of standards that we would, A, engage with those companies early. We would talk to them about wildlife impacts, habitat impacts, connectivity impacts of what they were planning. The department tracks every single new energy project that is being registered. And we meet with those groups and we talk to them about what improvements they can make, what changes they can make. I'll give you a great example of one. On a wind turbine farm, we found that the way that they staggered the wind turbines forced specifically doves to fly in a certain pattern to avoid the first windmill, but to only get hit by the second one. And so we found that by changing the locations of those, we could minimize some of those impacts. So it is the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality that for state operated renewable energy, they're the ones that will approve those energy stations. For the BLM, it's any BLM land, they take care of their own. The U.S. Forest Service is also an approver of it. So the department isn't really in that decision maker, but we do all we can to inform them and to help them get the right station that they need to set up with minimal impact to the landscape. And I'll just add an anecdotal note in talking to a couple of the people that engage in this. We find for the most part the companies are very accommodating to the wildlife needs. So thank you.
Thank you.
No follow-up, Rich? Okay, thank you. My question for you, Jim, the role of all successful commissioners is to help develop effective strategies to manage Arizona's wildlife in the best ways possible. In order to do this effectively, a first-hand knowledge of our state's diverse wildlife is invaluable. Could you please elaborate on your life's experiences relating to our state's wildlife, as well as your interest in hunting, fishing, bird watching, or other non-consumptive outdoor activities?
Mr. Chairman, you said I have 45 minutes. So
yeah, give us the short answer.
Okay, thank you, sir. So what actually started me on this path is several years ago in Payson. I am an avid bass fisherman. I own a small business where I build and repair custom fishing rods. But I know my wife's in the audience, but I'll say I'm addicted to bass fishing, so it's bad. And but we were able to see at Roosevelt Lake that from the tournaments that were going on down there, the weights of the 5 fish that are brought to the scale were going down. And so fishermen began to say, there's something wrong with this lake, there's something wrong, and this happened over a 2-3 year period. And after that time, it was so bad that we could show data from these bass fishing tournaments over the years that the trend was going down. The fish were getting smaller, not as many were being caught. So we formed a group up there called the Tonto Basin Roundtable, and we met with the Game and Fish Department, and they went out and did a survey on the lake, and they found that there was actually an invasive species, a gizzard shad, which is actually a bait fish, usually not a bad thing on an eastern lake that has a lot of structure and cover in it. But in our impounds here in the west, they found that they were attacking the eggs or the nests of the crappie and the bass. And so we saw this slight decline going on over years until it reached to the critical mass. And so with the help of the department's biologists and the aquatics group, they came up with 2 fixes. One was to bring in some Florida strain bass, which are more aggressive feeders. They are ferocious eaters of bait fish. And to put habitat structures into Roosevelt. Like today, there are over 1,000 structures in Roosevelt Lake that are artificial habitat down there. Those 2, you could see an immediate turnaround in the tournament results. And here we are 5-6 years down the road, and I would say that Roosevelt Lake is one of the premier bass fishing lakes across the country again. So that passion kind of led me to do that. I'm an avid turkey hunter. That's my thing, to go out there and work with them. But I also enjoy going to a lot of the different camps. As a commissioner, we get to go to the youth deer camp. We get to go to small game camps. We get to go to a lot of the WCO camps. The Arizona Deer Association holds different camps that I enjoy going to and talking with the different community about the Game and Fish Department and about what role the commission plays in there. So I'm a lifelong kind of person with hunting and fishing, and I just enjoy the outdoors.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate your answer.
Thank you, sir.
Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You sort of neutered my first question that I have about attendance, so I'm going to jump down to my second question. Fair chase, along with the North American model for wildlife conservation, should be the 2 backbones of hunting in our nation and state. Tell me why this statement is accurate and your views of the 2 items, fair chase and the North American model.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Madden. So let me start with the North American model. Long history there. And it is really the guiding light. As all of you know, in the early 1900s, wildlife across the western states was being decimated. There were no rolls. There was a great market for hides and meat back east and in Europe, and a lot of people were into the transportation business, literally down the Mississippi to New Orleans to send hides and antlers and meat to Europe. In the early 1900s, President Theodore Roosevelt, Aldo Leopold, and several others got together and said, we need some conservation models. And that's how the North American model was established. 7 tenets in the North American model, and all of those guide principles that we have today. I've said in many meetings, in fact, I've said it from that podium, that when we have a tough decision to make as a commission, the North American model is a guiding light to hold us to that. The wording is old, just like a lot of our older documents, including the Constitution, but the theme, the message is in there and provides a lot of answers to issues that are addressed before the commission. For fair chase, this is a new concept. One of the opportunities that commissioners get to do twice a year is we go to the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. This is 11 different states in the West, a couple of provinces in Canada, and including Alaska. And we talk about what are the accomplishments that a commission has done or a department has done over the last 6 months, and what areas do we need to improve. When I started in there, fair chase was barely mentioned. Today, every other state is starting to catch up to Arizona with a concept of fair chase. Fair chase is basically that. It gives the animal an equal opportunity of escape, of detection. Not necessarily take, but an escape of detection. And we've had many discussions about this, including trail cameras and coyote contests that were out there for prize money. And so fair chase is the equal opportunity for the animal to escape. It's something to be adhered to. Technology is advancing at a faster rate than any of us can imagine. We see it every day in our lives. The same is true in the hunting and fishing community. In the hunting community, I mean, firearms now that can shoot 1,000 yards out of the box, laser-guided bullets, from your smartphone to your scope to calculating wind speeds and directions before you shoot. Those things all have to be evaluated. The Arizona Game and Fish Department, through the commission, looks every month at new technologies that are coming online. It's important to do that because some of these we need to get ahead of before they actually get ingrained into the hunting community. And I'll use the trail cameras as a perfect example. Trail cameras were around for a lot of years before people started to think about it as a fair chase issue. Once we did that, it was much harder to convince people because now it was part of their package to hunt, and they were just used to using that as a tool for hunting. Fair chase allows us that opportunity to get in front of some of these new technologies, and we are changing statutes and changing rules within the department every year to acknowledge laser-guided bullets, as an example, is to be unethical and not deemed to be fair chase by the commission. So both very important, Mr. Madden, and you are correct. They are the backbone to hunting in Arizona.
Thank you. No follow-up.
No follow-up. Okay. Norm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you describe the landowner compact program, and if in your term anything that you've done to that would affect it?
Absolutely. Thank you. What a great program to start with. Arizona is kind of unique. Let me start with some adjoining states where some states will actually issue tags to landowners to get access to their properties. In Arizona, we have a landowner contract agreement where ranches sign on to this program, and we provide funding for habitat improvements, for conservation work, for survey work on those different landowners. Could be a ranch, could be agriculture. All of those are the same. However, by working with these landowners and keeping that access, it allows the department to issue tags there. It allows the public access to go in there and hunt. But at the same time, we respect the landowners by putting up gates or sign-in boxes or whatever it takes to keep that relationship open between the landowners and the hunting community. So the commission has diligently worked through landowner relations to make sure that we had that. And if I didn't state this clearly, we allow the landowners to actually set the rules on their land. So if a landowner wants to have one section of his property hunted and maybe not another section, we accommodate him to do that. But the whole goal behind all of this, sir, is to gain access for our public, for our hunters, for outdoor recreation, not only just hunting, but recreational uses of those properties.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I can ask.
Yes, you bet.
You touched on something earlier. Might have been Rich's discussion with you about solars, and you said that the department tracks energy projects that are registered. I have firsthand experience with an energy project that wasn't registered because there was no line sighting involved, and wildlife was affected by it. Have you, in your term on the commission, done anything to ensure that caveats like is line sighting required or not a way for an energy utility to get out of talking to the department? 'Cause, I mean, I don't feel that these projects should go in that can jeopardize access to public lands without the commission being involved. And I think I'd like to know if you think that caveat is still there, or that loophole.
So I am not familiar with any that have not been at least alerted that they're doing this. I think at some point they'd have to go to ADEQ or to BLM or to the Forest Service to apply for permits or whatever. So they would have to have that. I think the authority is in statute. So that's who's going to make the ultimate decisions on solar energy projects. So the commission and the department is taking a stance, and we're doing all we can to minimize that impact, because you're correct, it is not zero, but to minimize that impact for the protection of wildlife and habitat and corridors in those areas.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. John, second question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Guggenhauer, my second question regards commercialization of wildlife. Wildlife is a limited resource that has the potential to create profit when used for commercial enterprise. In general, market hunting and fishing are practices of the past. But there is still a lot of money spent on sport hunting and angling. Do you believe the profit motive can negatively impact the North American model of wildlife management? And if so, what practices do you see as a threat to that model, which we should never accept here in Arizona?
So just clarification, when you say profit model, are you speaking of the one in England?
Profit motive.
Motive, I'm sorry, motive.
Not the model, not the English one.
Thank you. So back to the North American model, right? One of the tenets is that there will not be commercialization of wildlife. We have seen revocation cases where people have done this in the past. I do think it's a threat. I don't support any type of commercialization of it. But once again, we go back to the wording of the North American model. There are farms. Everybody buys fish from salmon farms that are created. So that portion of it to the economy, I think, is a good thing. But I think if you put wildlife in there, real wildlife, that you threaten then the existence of that. It's another motive for people to go out and exploit the wildlife that we have in our country. This takes us back to the early 1900s and the beginning of the NAM, North American Model discussion. So I do not support any type of commercialization or anything that even gets close to that.
Any follow-up, John?
No follow-up.
Okay, thank you. Rich?
Commissioners, you, I'm sure, are aware, most recently the state of Colorado is starting to introduce northern gray wolves into their state. What concerns might the Game and Fish Department and the Commission have, along with its partners, over further introduction of the gray wolves and the effect on the Mexican gray wolf program?
Yes, sir. Great question. Last year, when I was the chairman of the commission, we penned a letter to the governor of Colorado and the Commission of Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico, informing that we were greatly concerned about this. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife leads the Mexican gray wolf program with assistance of the Arizona Game and Fish Department and the New Mexico Game and Fish Department. Our fear was that as we see Mexican gray wolves move further to the north, we've taken some as far as Flagstaff already, and with the larger northern gray wolves coming south, If they would crossbreed, if they would do that, we would lose the entire endangered species or the subspecies of the Mexican gray wolf. And that's the concern of this commissioner, and I think the commission in general. A lot of time and effort and money and knowledge has gone into expanding the Mexican gray wolf program. It's on the upswing. The program is successful. It's doing what the Endangered Species Act requires agencies, it requires a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Agency to do. An interaction with a non-Mexican gray wolf species would be catastrophic. And so the commission will do whatever it takes to keep those two species separated. Right now in Colorado, they're telling us that all of the wolves that are going to be released are going to be collared. They are monitoring those wolves. If one of them crosses into either Utah or into Arizona, the different agencies will be alerted. They will go capture that wolf using the GPS data and tranquilizers, and they will return it to Colorado. That's the way the rule was stated today. We'll see where that goes down the road, but yes, sir, we are, I guess the word is monitoring. We'll continue to watch the progress of that over the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay. Thank you, Rich. Jim, my second question, Arizona's blessed to have a large number of non-governmental organizations, NGOs as we call them, dedicated to the conservation of big game animals as well as fish and bird species. The volunteer work performed by these NGOs not only supplements efforts of the Arizona Game and Fish Department personnel, but it also brings in serious matching funds through programs like Pittman-Robertson. What are your feelings on their contributions, and what volunteer work have you been involved with related to wildlife NGOs in Arizona?
Pretty simple answer, Mr. Chairman. We could not do what we do without our NGOs/WCOs, wildlife conservation organizations. You're right. The volunteer work is remarkable of what they do, whether it's building fish habitats, removing fence lines, working on streams up in Payson last year. Trout Unlimited brought 100 people onto the East Verde River after the big flood that they had up there, and reconstructed the lake or the stream to put rocks and put trees in so that there were areas for habitat for the trout that are in the East Verde River. I could say the same thing about the Antelope Foundation, the Arizona Elk Society, the Arizona Deer Association, and we go on and on. But these groups of volunteers that come out are just phenomenal. They're there to volunteer their time, to volunteer their efforts and their knowledge to supporting wildlife, and quite frankly, we couldn't do it. From a financial standpoint, as you so accurately stated, it is imperative that we can use those dollars as matching funds so that Arizona qualifies for more PR and DJ dollars that come into our state and go right back into the habitat into the state. So huge effort. Can't thank those guys a lot. And I'm looking at you. I mean, some of you guys are them. So thank you for doing that, and we'll continue to work with NGOs and WCOs every opportunity we get.
Yeah, one thing, Jim, could you talk about which groups you've personally served with?
So a couple that I work with, and one in Payson is our Mogollon Sporting Association. This is a conservation group out of Payson, and lots of volunteers and lots of work that goes into habitat projects, fishing projects, stocking of our community fishing waters up there, stocking of the lakes, and stocking of Roosevelt Lake. So, just been involved with MSA for about 15 years now, and great organization.
Thank you, Jim. Pat?
Thank you. Jim, tell us about how you see the role of commissioners in interacting with department employees and pushing objectives.
Great question. Thank you. One of the endeavors I took when I became a commissioner was to go out and meet with different branches and divisions within a department. As 5 years as a commissioner, I'm happy to report that I have met with each and every branch and every division within the department where we have a communication meeting and we get to talk to the employees about what the role of the commission is, how the commission views different mission statements for the department, and how we support the activities that they do out there. I was amazed that when I started talking to some of these groups, they didn't have a real firm understanding of what the commission is and how we help them in their jobs. And I'm happy to say that after 5 years of doing this, and by the way, we schedule one of these meetings most every month, we've been able to help educate the employees about how the commission helps, what our role is in the big picture of conserve and protect, and be able to help them do their jobs better. More importantly, though, Mr. Madden, is the opportunity to go out and speak to public groups. Again, on a monthly basis, I travel around the state. I'm from, as I said, from Payson, so a lot of organizations around Rim Country in the northern part of the state. I go meet with them, whether they're homeowner associations or PTAs or whatever the organization is. I get to go talk with them and help spread the word of what is Conserve and Protect to the Arizona Game and Fish Commission. Why is it meaningful of what we do? Why do we need to have hunting? Why is it regulated? A lot of the public doesn't understand this, and it gives commissioners a great opportunity to go spread the word about what the hunting is. One of the biggest topics that we have in Rim Country is feeding of wildlife. And a year ago, we started a campaign to inform people in Rim Country the dangers of feeding wildlife. And we gave lots of examples that it doesn't end well for the wildlife. People actually get hurt. 12 people in Payson area had to go to the hospital last year because of wildlife interactions, and it goes on and on. After a year of being on the radio, of being on podcasts, and being discussing different topics that relate to the commission and the communities out there, I think it's making a difference. And we're able to help educate the public at large, plus the Game and Fish Department, about what the role of the commission is.
Follow up. Go ahead. What part does the director play in all this?
Director Gray?
Yes.
So we jokingly say that the commission has one employee, and it's because it takes 5 commissioners to direct one employee. That one employee is the director, is Director Gray. One of the finest communicators I've ever met in my life. That's a key piece of his success in this department. He promotes anything that is going to help advance the department or support the commission. Anytime that I had a question, anytime I had consternation, he's always able to give wise counsel on how decisions should be made, or if he can add any input to that. But he's a fantastic director. He's one of the longest tenured game and fish directors in the country. Ty has 31 years is with the Game and Fish Department. And when we go to one of these waffle meetings that we were talking about earlier, he chairs different committees. His time is sought after. His input and his counsel is appreciated not only by Arizona, but by all the western states.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Norm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you give me a sense of what you feel the benefits are of having cattle responsibly grazing on public lands?
It's a big question, sir. So cattle grazing on public lands is a right. That's in statute, that's in law. Damage to riparian areas, damage to habitat, damage to wildlife are all pieces of that. And at any time on the commission, we address those areas. We've also had issues of trespass cattle, where intentionally or unintentionally, cattle move off onto other allotments where they shouldn't be. So we promote legal grazing where a pasture is identified, but there's a responsibility to make sure that the fencing is adequate, that the water is adequate, and that the rules are followed there. Back to our HPC conversation, one of the remarkable things that I saw was we were getting complaints on one landowner's allotment that the riparian area and the stream itself was being ruined by cattle that were in the area. Through our HPC and our LRP program, we were able to go put water tanks very close to the stream. And guess what? The cattle went to the water catchments rather than go down to the stream. So there are solutions to those problems out there. And through our LRP program, I think we've done some great work. I'm not saying that it's resolved. There are many issues out there, as you know, but the commission continues to monitor those.
May I ask a follow-up?
Please, Norm.
You touched on trying to find a way to mitigate the riparian situation. Do you have other suggestions or ideas to add, or do you even feel that ranchers who pay to protect and manage public lands as part of their day-to-day operation? I mean, do you have other tools or thoughts in your toolbox that might give value to ranchers to try to keep the public lands open?
Yes. So, kind of a description of the landowner relationship program. We do that. But back to other ideas, fencing is always a big one. I mean, elk will knock down fence, deer will knock down fence, cattle will knock down fence. So it is a constant maintenance program to make sure that those fences are in good repair around these areas. Putting fences up, we saw one example where they put it along the riparian area, so the cattle actually could not go there due to the fence boundary that was there. But the way to execute the landowner relationship program is to develop these relationships. These are long-term relationships. Our wildlife managers and different people from the LRP program visit these ranches on a regular basis. We like to have that lines of communication. We want to hear what the ranchers are hearing. And I'll be the first to tell you, hunters and anglers and OHVers and people that are on those public lands, they are not always the best stewards of those lands. And I've seen pictures of some of the damage that's been done that the landowner then had to go back and replace that. But we understand that. We want to work with the landowners through the commission or through the LRP to make sure that we understand what those problems are and we can help fix them. But it's real, and it's real.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do any of the other board members have any questions for Mr. Guggenauer? Hearing none, Jim, could we get a closing remark from you, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to express my gratitude. Being, as I started saying, it's an honor to be a commissioner. And I think if you spoke to any commissioner that we have on our board, they would say the same thing. Our commission today, and the ones that I've been associated with over the last 5 years, is a well-working group. We all have conservation on our minds first. The protection of wildlife is paramount. We are not a political organization. There is nothing political about the Arizona Game and Fish Department. We have our mission, and every one of the commissioners that I've been associated with follow that. So I truly appreciate your considering my application. It's an honor to be here again, and I look forward to the opportunity if it's afforded. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Really
Thanks,
appreciate
Jim.
it.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our 3 interviews. We'll move on to agenda item number 6. But first of all, we're going to go ahead and do our points, do our voting. Cindy, do you want our points right on our notes? I see there's a column there for points that are awarded. Would you like each board member to vote right on this form?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that would be fine, and then you can just hand them down.
Thank you. Yeah, I know we went through it earlier in the meeting, but as a reminder for all of our board members, you have up to 20 points to allocate to these 3 interviewees. You cannot cast more than 10 votes for one particular person, and you are not obligated to allocate all 20 points. Pat, you should have a summary and notes page. Looks like this. Do you have a spare one, Cindy? Perfect. He can vote on that. Do any of the board members have any questions on the voting process? Pat, if you could please write your name then across here, since we don't have that. So if everybody could complete that, and we'll pass them down to Cindy for tabulation.
Mr. Chairman, I have the results of the voting.
Thank you, Cindy. If you could please announce them.
Okay. Israel Torres, 5 points. Patrick Headington, 45 points. And James Guggenauer, 40 points.
I'll entertain a motion from a
Mr.
board
Chairman,
member.
I would like to move to recommend the names of James Guggenauer and Patrick Headington to the Governor's Office for review and appointment to the Arizona Game and Fish Commission.
Second.
Norm, I think you got in first.
Good.
So we've got a motion on the floor and a second to send the names of Pat Headington and James Guggenauer to the Governor's Office, a total of 2 recommended folks. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to our last agenda item is setting a date and time for our next meeting. We typically elect a chairman. We'll be electing a chairman for 2024. Cindy, do you recall what a normal time frame is for that telephonic meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I usually survey the board members in December, and then we pick a date to meet in January to have the final meeting of the session.
That'd be great. So, yeah, if you could do that, we'll plan on getting an email from you in December sometime.
Certainly, I'll take care of that.
Yeah. Any more business from any board member? Hearing none, the meeting's adjourned.